Shop the Sherwin-Williams Memorial Day sale and get 30% off paints and stains May 15th through the 28th. Whether you're refreshing your interior or exterior, we've got the colors to bring your vision to life. And with delivery, getting everything to your door is easier than ever. Shop online to have it delivered or visit your neighborhood Sherwin-Williams store. Click the banner to learn more. Retail sales only. Some exclusions apply. See store for details. Delivery available on qualifying orders.
At Stanford Medicine, we know discoveries change lives, and advances made right here lead to better health for patients everywhere. It's why our world-class School of Medicine and adult and children's health systems work together, pioneering treatments, teaching the innovators of tomorrow, and delivering the best possible care today. Stanford Medicine, advancing knowledge, improving lives. StanfordMedicine.org.
An aligned show that's smaller can be way more valuable than a huge show that is not reaching like a specific audience, right? Because I think of podcasts as the big Venn diagram. So you could have shows that cover multiple different topics, right, within one show. But if the audience that you're really trying to reach and that you know you can move the needle with is like this tiny little piece of the pie, even if they're reaching 100,000 people an episode or whatever it may be, like you're getting a percentage. Or if you have a show that's 10% that size, but it is all your audience, there's to me, it's just more efficient.
Step into the world of success with your brand amplified, the ultimate podcast designed to unravel the intricacies of thriving businesses. I'm your host, Annika Jackson, and I'm on a mission to uncover the stories, strategies, and secrets that have propelled entrepreneurs and business leaders to success.
So let's talk a little bit about, we've talked about traditional PR a little bit and podcasting. What is it that excites you about the podcast opportunity and what makes you think it's different and it is the opportunity people should lean into?
Yeah. And so when I started doing PR for Emma, she had a podcast, which was really successful. And I love working with clients that have their own podcast because I think that we can talk about that too. I think it creates so much opportunity. And I've seen some really cool things happen just from them having the ability to connect with people via like their guest format and what that can lead to. But podcasts to me were so transformational during that time. And it's not like they were super new, but they're not, I feel like the election really kind of shot the independent media really into the forefront. So it was still like, it was a platform that people were using, but I don't think PR people were thinking about it quite as much. I can't say that definitively, but that's my kind of assessment of the situation. And I started to realize, I would listen to people on podcasts and then be like, oh, I will go follow them. And now PR people I thought maybe I didn't like so much, then I'd listen to them because the topic was interesting. And then I would walk away thinking, oh, wow, I have a completely different perception of them, right? So when we think about what PR truly is, it's influencing perception in some way, shape, or form, right? Like there's so many different types of PR, but I would say that's probably one of the biggest common, denominators of it. And I felt like I never left a podcast without having a perception changed. And it felt really powerful to me. And every coach I worked with, every person I went to for a session, it was always because I had heard them on a podcast. And I thought, I want to learn more about this. And so I started to also kind of along the way meet other PR people that were independent and doing this, PR sort of the way I did. And it was so different because I feel like in my old world, that would have been competitive to reach out to someone or talk. And it was not that at all. And so I, even over the last several years, have built a whole network of PR people that we give each other referrals if a client comes in that's not exactly aligned for us, or we share contacts, or we connect people with producers. And it's really a beautiful thing in general. So to me, the podcast world is really welcoming in so many ways. It can be very harsh, I think, in some ways too, depending on what you're doing or how thin your skin is with being ignored in a lot of the cases, I think, when you're pitching. But I think in general, it is one of the most powerful mediums to influence the perception of somebody. And I will give you an example. My client, Emma, the human design coach, when I started working with her, there's some names that are very big in that space, right? Like people know Erin Claire Jones or Jenna Zoe or Day Luna, and they are here in the US. They've been around for a long time. Emma had a big following, but it was like her following, right? So she tends to speak, I think, she speaks to everybody, but primarily women our age tend to be, kind of drawn to her because I do think some of the other ones, not that they couldn't appeal, but they tend to be like a younger, more like millennial or younger audience in many cases. And so was drawn towards her because of her practical nature. Well, she was known, but again, like in a certain space. So it's about 3.5 years that we've been working together. Now, if you go into ChatGPT or whatever your preferred platform is for AI and search who are the most well-known modern design influencers or teachers, she now shows up in the top three. So she went from, I wouldn't say unknown, but compared to the magnitude of like a Jenna Zoe, she's now right up there. And when I ask it, well, how did she get here? And one of the things that the language model will say is it's from consistent podcast guesting. So to me, there's pretty much like no better example of the fact that consistency really pays off too. And that if you do it over time and you ladder and you're committed to a long-term PR strategy, it really can move the needle too.
Yeah.
And that's primarily I'd say like 90% podcasts we've done.
Yeah. Fantastic. And do you worry ever about the size of the show that you put guests on? Because I know sometimes, I mean, I've helped produce a couple podcasts, and I also try to find podcasts for those hosts to be on.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a perception sometimes that, I need to go on the big podcasts. And you're rolling your eyes.
Yeah. Well, I'm not even rolling. I'm nodding because I think, I do a lot of discovery calls with people and they're like, I only want the in-persons. So I would say two things to that. Number one, an aligned show that's smaller can be way more valuable than a huge show that is not reaching like a specific audience, right? Because I think of podcasts as the big Venn diagram. So you could have shows that cover multiple different topics, right, within one show. But if the audience that you're really trying to reach that you can move the needle with is like this tiny little piece of the pie, even if they're reaching 100,000 people an episode or whatever it may be, like you're getting a percentage. Review of a show that's 10% that size, but it is all your audience. There's to me, it's just more efficient is the one thing. And then the other thing I would say too is, like people will come in and ask me all the time, what are your relationships like? And I'm like, well, my relationships are really, really good, but every client is different. And if I wasn't able to pitch you cold to a podcast and get results, you shouldn't hire me anyway, because there's so many podcasts out there. So to even, when I talk to people that limit themselves to like a subset of podcasts that their PR agent or whoever they're working with might know, I just think that to me is just not a strategic way to look at things. And so maybe whoever they were talking to before was spraying and praying. So relationships, which we can talk about that too, I think are important in many different ways when you're working with podcasts. But it doesn't mean that you have to have those relationships with those giant shows to get somebody on as a guest either. And I think I've proven that even to myself that, I don't know if you're familiar with Almost 30. Do you know that podcast? Yeah. So I booked a client on Almost 30 that doesn't have a huge following. We've been doing podcasting for like 2 years and we've laddered her up. And just in the last couple of months, like from cold outreach, I have gotten her on Almost 30. And then the Chibi Magnetic podcast expanded. I don't know if you're familiar with that one. So she had like two giant, which in our space, they're probably two of the biggest shows out there that are really, really tough nuts to crack. So I think you can do the big shows, but she's gotten tremendous value from many smaller shows even before that.
Yeah. Love to hear that. And let's talk about relationships because as a podcaster, they are so important to me as well. So I'd love to hear your perspective and then I'll chime in a little bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, to me, anytime I am pitching a client, I'm not just pitching because I want them on that show. I'm pitching because that's kind of what I call what I do intuitive PR. And I think I've gotten really, I think pretty good at it, more just by trusting myself, not because I've developed some skill, but I really can kind of feel into it now and be like, can I see them working together in some way beyond that episode? And it's actually such a beautiful thing when that happens because I have found in so many cases, clients have, been invited to teach into communities or they've invited the guests to come and teach in and they've kept in touch or they talk or when they're in person in the same city, they get together. And to me, that is really, and this is not going to happen every single time, of course, but I think when you can pitch with an eye to building those connections, I think there's so much more value in, like in what comes out of it at the end of the day. Rather than just saying like, oh, I need to hit 5 interviews this month. I'm lucky to have clients that understand that like they would rather have fewer interviews that are of quality than just ones to say, I did 10 podcast interviews this month.
Hmm. I had so much to say about that, but I will zip my lips for a little bit. But what's interesting is because I'm on a lot of lists for different publicists, and some of them are PR, podcast specific bookers, and some are holistic, I would say, publicists who are looking at all of the different areas and how they work together. And there are a couple people who I won't even look at their emails anymore
Hmm.
because
I get them too because I vet podcasts guests for
yes.
two of my clients. Yeah.
And I hate to say because sometimes they have really great people, but I also know they're going to send me a generic pitch. I've had the founder on the podcast before, and every email is going to sound like they don't know me because it's just a software program probably or an admin who's doing it, who doesn't have that relationship, who doesn't know in the CRM that, yes, this person's been on the show. I've had this many people from your organization on. And so I just ignore those completely. But there are other people I know who consistently bring me amazing guests every single time. And they'll also send me a copy of the book. And there are people who have really great published books. And not that every guest of mine is like that, right? Because obviously I like to have a wide swath, but it's nice because I know that, okay, if this person reaches out, I'm going to say yes every time because I know that they are going to be media trained. They're going to know exactly, the person will probably have listened to some episodes and they'll be really well prepared. And so I find a lot of joy in that. And I love the fact that you're talking about how you can approach podcast hosts and pitching because you're looking at that future relationship, not just at that immediate gain. So thank you for that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like I wouldn't be doing like and I consider myself, but there's people that call themselves podcast bookers, and I consider myself a PR strategist, even though I may specialize in podcasts. And I think that to me, I take pride in that, and we're not going to hit it out of the park every single time. The other thing that I have found that's been really, really successful for my clients too, from a relationship point of view, is if there's like a host of a bigger show that I really know I would love to have my client on because they would offer tremendous value, but I know they may not always look at them because they're going to sort of like the top names. What I have found to be tremendously successful is inviting those people onto my clients' shows first. They most of the time say yes because I think a lot of the time podcasters aren't always getting as many invoice bites depending on who they are. And so they, a lot of them have books, and that has worked in many cases because I'm always like, I know once I get them in the same like virtual room that they're going to hit it off, and then it's going to go that way, and then it will be very easy. So, I think if you can think about it that way, I think people would be surprised what they could even do for themselves so I love working with clients that have podcasts for that reason, because it does give me another tool to leverage too.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk about pitching directly versus pitching software.
Mm. Yeah,
Love
that's a
to
good
get your
one
thoughts.
because we talked about that. Well, you know what? It's interesting too, because I know I saw like when I was preparing, I saw on your list, like you asked sort of like, what's kind of coming next for you? And what I've been trying to do, and we talked a lot about AI when you and I chatted, offline. And I know you've built a really cool AI system to help you vet pitches from people that you don't know, right? The ones you haven't, kind of put in the auto spam folder. And so what I've been working on, because I do feel like PR can benefit so many people, but the way
Mhm.
I do it, it's not inexpensive, right? And so because I know what I'm putting into it, and you get to a point in your career where you understand your value. It doesn't mean I don't have ridiculous prices, but like I like to get involved and understand my clients' businesses. I look for long-term relationships. However, I know there's people out there that are like earlier in their business, they're at that maybe scaling or growth phase. They know what they offer. They have a great service or product they can talk about. And so I've been playing with ways and systems to help me infuse my strategy, but with automation and some AI support. And so I use a lot of the paid systems that are out there to play around with. I've tested, so I kind of at this point, like, I don't know how people find me, but they asked me to come test their systems. And I still wish, like, if I could take them all and mash them together, there could be really this like perfect thing out there. But I don't know that I'll ever like create a system that I could give to somebody else, but I am finding ways so that I can take on either shorter term clients, more clients, and be a little bit more scalable and actually help people have my strategy involved, even using things like human design if they're interested in that as well. Because I would like to help more people because I can see the power of, like a really strong podcast strategy for individuals who are running a business.
Yeah, 100%. And I, of course, work on the side of, I think everybody should have a podcast. And I want to help people get to that point where they all have a podcast. And even at the university, my students, a lot of them are continuing. I mean, today is finals day for the spring term for the in-person classes, and everybody's turning in their final folders of all of their work for my podcasting course and my other courses that I teach. And some of them, I was just checking out some of the work, and I'm like, some of these students have 14 episodes out already.
Wow.
And they just started publishing probably less than 2 months ago.
Mhm.
So I'm like, yes, this is a win for me because this tells me they're going to maintain that consistency. They're going to keep on doing it and they see value. And it doesn't mean they're all going to do it the exact way I do it, which is also the beauty of podcasting, right? There's
Yeah.
room for a lot of different ways to interview, a lot of different ways to have our content come out.
Yeah, I mean, some people like to interview people. Some people like to do solo episodes. Again, another PR person that I sort of ran into on LinkedIn that we realized we lived close to one another. He came from the music industry. He used to book bands and things like that. And then when COVID came, he moved into podcasting. And so he and I have we started getting together like once a month and recording and putting out a little podcast about getting booked on podcasts. So, I never thought I would have done it myself, but for me, having somebody to do it with actually has been such a fun way for us to kind of say like, oh, what should we talk about? And then we'll just record like 3 episodes in a session and then put them out like every other week. And we've been getting a really great response. So it's, I do think that I don't know that I would have ever undertaken that on my own because, it's a lot of work. But I think that there is so much value there for people to consume on any given topic. And I think that's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And that's Spencer, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Spencer is one of my favorite podcast pitchers as well.
Oh, I didn't know. He's got great clients too. I always say to him, I was like, you undersell yourself. I'm like, you're so good at what you do. He really, really is good, especially like from not coming from a traditional PR background. He does a great job. Oh, I can't wait to tell him. Maybe he'll hear us.
Yeah, I love it. Actually, I think one of his clients is coming on my show pretty soon, like
Oh, cool.
later this week. So you talked about how you don't just place your clients on podcasts, but you have a podcast. You have clients with podcasts. So can you talk about being on the other side of the coin, like the kind of pitches that you get and what works for you and your clients?
Yeah, it's interesting too because I feel like my pitches were always good because they're thoughtful and I always lead with value because I think one of the biggest things that happens is people are pitching themselves and not the value to the show. And that's really where I think I always say to people, if you can get that piece right, you're probably 70% of the way there. And then you want them to see that it'll be interesting too. Because I think there's sometimes people, like the way they want to talk about it might not always be as palatable to like an hour-long conversation if it's this like sort of, ping pong match back and forth. But I think in seeing the pitches that come in, and my client has a pretty big podcast. So we get a decent volume of pitches each week that I go through and I can pretty much, and I respond to everyone too, because I also know what it's like being on the other side of it too and not getting, how much we don't get responses so much of the time. And so even if it's quick, I always reply because then that stops follow-ups and whatnot as well. But yeah, like I can tell now when I'm getting pitches from one particular AI system. I mean, I can see it from a mile away and, there's no links. I'd have to do all the work to even try to figure out like, really what does this person do? They're these like vague pitches that are more about they can share it with their this many followers or like, here's their resume and it's, being pulled from LinkedIn and there's no insight or like idea of what that conversation could feel like. Like I want to feel something when I read a pitch that makes me, unless it's like a topic or a name that's like so big that you would never say no. But there's some like pretty impressive credentials that come through that I still decline because I don't see the value to the audience, or, in many cases you can tell like they have no idea what the show's even about. It's spraying and praying. And so it's really actually, it's made me look at my pitches even harder. And not to say that I had to do a lot, but I really, really think about my pitches now and how they will land with somebody based on some of the things that I've seen. I won't sit here and rip pitches apart. I know there's like plenty of people on LinkedIn that will do that, but it's pretty, some of the stuff you see is pretty like either cringy, or you could just tell that they didn't put anything into it. So for me, like I'm always leading with value. I've even, we talked about this before too, like I've even stopped saying, unless I really, really loved an episode or a guest, I've stopped even including that at the top of my pitches because I feel like that's also sort of like a tell now that a lot of people are using. And so for me, it's always like this formula that's specific to every show I pitch that would say, basically in a nutshell, I know your listeners come to you, your listeners are this that come to you for that. And so I feel like if you can nail that piece too, like it shows you understand the host and the mission and what the listeners want. And then from there, you can introduce yourself or the client. I like links. I've never had an issue with spam. I know a lot of people will say no links, you get thrown to spam. I don't think that if you have an established email address, I don't think that's a problem, unless you're sending 300 pitches out a day or something, which you shouldn't be doing anyway. And then, and then some bullet points of what the conversation could look like, examples of shows you've been on before, even if it's a list. I always do a Spotify list for all my clients that have every single interview that they've done. So I'll list out a couple. Even in terms of also in connection, I go on Instagram and I look at anyone that the host might follow where my client's been on the show before. So you can kind of make some connections there right off the bat. They see a name that they're familiar with. It's not always the case, but you can kind of assess like what space they play in and which shows. So there's always a custom few shows at the bottom. And then just, being grateful and human and saying, thank you for considering this. I know you get a lot of pitches. If it's not a fit, please let me know. I'll stop following up. Like things like that. I think people forget sometimes that there's like a human on the other side of the computer when they're sending out pitches, for sure.
Spotify playlist, everybody should take note of that. That's a fantastic idea. And I'm going to need to do that for myself for all the podcasts that I've been on, because I never even thought about doing that.
Yeah.
But that's brilliant.
Yeah, because you can't really do that on Apple, I don't think. So I feel like, I don't know why I ended up, like it just dawned on me one day, like, why am I not making a playlist of these? And then it's so nice because you always just have them right there. And so like I have one for I don't do a ton of interviews, but I do have my own. I do them for all my clients. I tell anybody that asks me, I'm like, it's the easiest way to capture all of your interviews in one place. And they're almost all out there. I don't think I've run into many but they weren't also on Spotify.
Yeah, exactly. So we talked a little bit about this, but what's the next step for you? Where do you see Curate Your Soul going?
I never know because I sort of follow the breadcrumbs as they come, but I love my long-term clients. Like I have 2 clients that have been with me for like 3 and 4 years that I think that they have seen real growth in their business from investing in PR and continuing on. I would like to work with more people. Like I always sort of have like a smaller rotation of shorter term clients that will come in just for a campaign for a book or, whatever they might have going on at that time. But I would love to, my goal this year is to, and I feel like I'm very close. Actually, I have several calls coming up over the next couple of weeks with potential clients to talk about like a lower tier offering where it'll be a little bit less like one-on-one touch with me, but I will be able to pitch them with strategy using some of these tools that I'm playing with behind the scenes. So my hope is to become more scalable. I really am like a one-woman show. I don't necessarily like bringing people on to help me for exactly the reason you said too. It's like then there comes a time where you're pitching a show and they're like, oh, I recognize this company, like you're saying, but they should know that they already have a relationship. And it's almost impossible. I guess if you had like a proprietary database where there would be notes or something like that. But I think in many cases, these pitchers are moving so fast that they don't have time. They're just working on volume. So my goal is to be able to give people something that I can reduce my prices a little bit for so that more people can access it. Still makes it valuable for me, but that it lets me automate some of the things that take a lot more of my time typically, but then they still get my strategy. Because I think that that's what really, anybody that does what we do, that's what you're paying for at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important distinction because anybody can sign up. There's a whole bunch of different softwares out there.
Hmm.
But you have to sign up and you have to know exactly how to pitch yourself appropriately. You have to know what profile do you really want to put up there. You have to know how to pitch because you might be matched with people, but you still have to pitch and you have to make that pitch
Yes.
intentional. And so there's a lot more that goes into it than just saying, oh, I'm going to subscribe to this thing because it's only X amount of, dollars per month for the subscription.
Exactly. It
Um,
seems inexpensive. But if you don't give it, so I've even had people that use the AI platform that we've talked about in the past. I've had a couple of clients that have come to me and said, I have someone in house to manage it. Will you set it up? And so I've actually gone in for some people and done the training of the model, my pitch templates, fed in like several campaigns so that it's reaching, specific audiences. But I'll tell you, even not that I wouldn't do that for other people if they were interested in it. But what I found was they just came to actually back to me this week and she said, I'm getting all these responses from podcasters that are saying, it's not a fit and they're right. Like it might be pitching, like she's sort of like an HR coach and I forget who she was, I don't know, went to like, let's like say like a plumbing podcast, like one of those types
oh,
of scenarios. And so, I mean, I'm making that up, but it was like
yeah.
something really off base. And so I said to her, I'm like, well, are you going and checking the shows every week? So I set everything up. The whole point was like after a month, I turned it over to them and she's like, well, no. So I went in and I looked, they've sent out 2,000 pitches in 6 months,
Oh,
which
no.
is insane. And I'm like, she must have just had it cranked all the way up to like the max number of pitches per day and was never looking at. So she was getting a fair number of interviews, as you can imagine. However, I can only imagine how many people that were annoyed. So it does make me a little bit hesitant, or like I might make people sign something saying, if I do this for you, you will ensure that the shows that are being fed in, that you're vetting them. Because that's another limitation of the system. You can't assume, even once the model's educated, that it is not going to have a keyword overlap or basically a slip, that it's, it's still a machine, right? That can't, it's not 100% correct all the time. And so I said to her, I was like, you have to go back in and start actually looking at shows and giving feedback because it's gotten so far off track because you've just let it run wild. Probably a good metaphor for AI in general.
I was just gonna say, this is why we still need humans in the loop. I mean, I always
Hmm.
say, yeah, I might not be putting as many episodes out right now because I'm not going to use an AI clone of myself to do an interview. I'm not going to put out stuff like that. There are people who do, and that's great. But this is like sacred time to me. It's this conversation, right? And being able to have another conversation with you. And I know that we're gonna have more after this. And AI can do certain things, but if you don't have the human in the loop, right? Even to the point of I have built out, different systems to vet guests, and now I've put them because now the LLMs are so good. So I'm like, oh, I don't really need the 4-bot system that I'd originally created. And so I'm testing out different models on chat or on Claude. And I have an admin who's helping me, and she's like, yeah, Claude is much harsher with the ratings. And
Oh,
then
interesting.
so I had to go in and I was like, oh, I need to recalibrate this one setting because it's been really hardcore about only people who have this much experience and are this,
Yeah.
and so it's like, okay, that's why, but you have to, and that's why it's important to test out different things and try them, but
Yeah.
always, again,
And
have the human
switching from
level.
one to the other, like I've even found that like I like a lot of things about Claude to help me pitch because I won't let it write my pitches, but I will let it help me refine pitches or do research and things like that. I mean, that's definitely alone made me more scalable on that front than doing it by hand. But what I find is that like chat still knows me better and can write more in my voice without, but I'm like, I need to commit more because it takes a lot of time to get them to know you. And when you use one of them, it can be something that small, like, right? Like you're saying, a setting or one criteria that can totally shift the whole balance
Yeah,
too.
absolutely. And that is, I think you and I are very aligned in that as well, in terms of how do we scale ourselves but still have the human interaction that we both want with our clients. And so
Mhm.
I don't know that this will be answered today, but it's
No.
something for us to think about and something for everybody who's listening to think about as well. How do you use tools to automate and scale and use AI technology appropriately, but also still have the good parts that you really love, that you're passionate about in your companies and your organizations?
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
true. I mean, I think even for the podcast hosts that are getting those pitches, I feel like it's our responsibility to continue to make sure that good pitches go out because I think a lot of these systems have actually made it harder on podcasters and then in turn harder on us because it's, your pitches get lost.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially if you're pitching through, I get pitches through every possible email address I have, even ones I don't use
Oh,
anymore.
yeah.
Instagram DMs that I don't look at as often as I should. Like
I know. How do
everyone.
you feel about that? That's a question that Spencer and I talked about too, like pitching in the DMs. I don't tend to do that because I feel
I
like
always,
it's
I always
hard to
ask people to
track.
then go into my email. And even then, it's not always like the email might have gotten lost and then they keep DMing me. I'm like, just send me another email. I'm going to see that faster probably. So, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like especially too, like if you have people that have a lot of followers, they're not even either they don't look because they know they get so much sort of spam in there too.
Yeah. All right. So, what is one thing everybody listening should do right now in terms of their PR visibility strategy?
Pitch themselves to a podcast. I always say, why not? People think that's so scary and intimidating, and I understand. But I always say, pitch yourself to a show that you really love because you know that show and you understand that host. And to me, that's one of the best ways to practice getting out there and doing it for yourself. I think anybody could do their own podcast PR. I think over time, it gets to be a lot in terms of being consistent, right? But if you're like, I want to go on a podcast a month, I mean, I feel like people could take an hour a week or less and reach out to podcasts with what they want to talk about and really make an impact on their visibility without, doing something that especially they like to have conversations.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay. And Amanda, we're obviously going to have your website and all the things in the show notes. Do you have a favorite quote, mantra, verse, poem, family motto?
Yeah, it's funny. I saw this in your list of standard
Yay.
questions and I was like, what am quotes? It's so I have such a hard time narrowing down. And then I realized it is right on a Post-it note sitting on my desk. And so I am a big believer that our attitude affects our perception and creates our reality. And so my favorite quote is, there's nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And that is Shakespeare from Hamlet.
When you were saying gratitude, I was thinking gratitude is my attitude, which used to be a
Mhm.
slogan that I had on a shirt, but it is
Yeah.
definitely something that's helpful.
Yeah, when the dog woke me up at 4:30 this morning, that's
Oh,
what I did. I had gratitude. I thought, I'm happy that she is here and I can be walking her and I'm able to walk. Because it's like, but it makes a huge difference in how you start your day and experience all the things that come your way. Not always
absolutely.
easy, but it's a good
Yeah.
goal to aspire to.
Well, this has been really fun. I wish that we didn't have to stop. I know that we'll be back, I'm sure, again, that I'll have you and some of your clients as guests on the show and hopefully on some of the other podcasts that I have queued up. This is a sign to anybody who's listening. If you have been sitting on an idea, stop sitting on it. Go and pitch yourself. Some of the best pitches I've had were because I ended up on somebody's book list and they sent a little personalized note. And maybe when I reached back out, they said, oh, my PR person sent this. You were on this list of women leaders who, and then I'm like, but I want you to come on the show now. And then establish relationship. Or people who are like following me on LinkedIn and have made some comments, but haven't actually tried to reach out yet. And I'm like, why are we not connected? And why are you not on the show? So just take that chance. There's nothing negative that'll come out of it, except maybe you'll learn how to do a better pitch if you don't get accepted. So I think in this day when we have ever more crowded field of online places that want our attention, getting your message out to the right people is important. So
Agree.
With that, thank you, Amanda, for being on the show. Thank you to everybody who's listening to this episode or watching it. Hopefully you gleaned some things that will give you some inspiration as you move forward in this lifetime and in this year. And if you haven't done your human design, check that out as well. It is pretty interesting. And Amanda really helped me learn a lot about my human design when we've had previous conversations. And now I'm like, okay, I need to dig back into that. So with that, I'll be back again with another amazing guest to share their story, their journey, and some tips and tricks for you very soon. Thanks for listening or watching to this episode of Your Brand Amplified. Don't forget to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And if you want to learn more, check us out at yourbrangamplified.com.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.
If you're serious about leadership, legacy, and building wealth with structure, you need to check out the CJ Moneyway Show. Hosted by CJ Moneyway, this podcast features powerful conversations with entrepreneurs, doctors, strategists, and global thought leaders who break down what it really takes to win without losing your integrity. This isn't surface motivation. It's discipline, clarity, execution. If you're ready to think bigger, build smarter, and lead with intention, tap into the CJ Moneyway Show, available wherever you get your podcasts.